All right, today we're going to dive into the life of one of the most influential and honestly most transformative figures in all of human history, Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam.
So that's the big question, right? How did one person, from what was then a remote corner of the world, spark a message that would shape a global civilization and a faith that today is followed by nearly 2 billion people? It's an incredible story. Let's get into it. Okay, but before we jump in, we have to acknowledge a major challenge for historians. Some scholars, like John Burton here, they argue that the sources for Muhammad's early life are, well, sparse. A lot of it was written down generations after he lived, which makes it really tough to separate historical fact from pious tradition. But then, on the flip side, you have scholars like Karen Armstrong who make the exact opposite point, that we actually know a ton about Muhammad, maybe more than any other major religious founder. So keeping both of those perspectives in mind is pretty crucial. We're going to walk that line as we start the story right at the beginning. So our story kicks off in the city of Mecca. You've got to picture it. A bustling, dusty hub for trade dominated by powerful tribes, especially the Quraysh. It was a place of fierce clan loyalties and a whole lot of gods. Muhammad's childhood was really defined by loss. I mean, his father died before he was even born, and his mother passed away when he was only 6. As an orphan, he was raised by his grandfather and then his uncle Abu Talib. Despite this really tough start, he built this incredible reputation for being trustworthy. They even gave him a nickname, Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy one. And that integrity is what caught the attention of a sharp, successful businesswoman named Khadija, who he eventually married. She wasn't just his wife, she was his rock. And this story, it's just a perfect little snapshot of the man he was. The Kaaba, the sacred cube in Mecca, was being rebuilt, and all the clan leaders started arguing, almost coming to blows, over who would get the massive honor of placing the black stone back in its wall. They decided the next person to walk in would be the judge. And who walks in but Muhammad? His solution was just genius. He puts the stone on a cloak and has each leader grab a corner to lift it together. He turned a moment that was about to explode into violence into one of total unity. So, he was a respected merchant, a trusted problem solver. But then something happens that changes everything. This is the moment that pivots his life, and you could argue, the history of the world, in a totally new direction. Now, it's really important we get our heads around this concept, why, or revelation. In the Islamic tradition, this isn't just Muhammad having a brilliant idea or a sudden inspiration. The belief is that this was a direct, external communication from God himself, delivered by the angel Gabriel. That idea is absolutely central to everything that follows. So by the time he's 40, Muhammad has this habit of going to a cave on Mount Hira, just outside Mecca, to pray and just think. It was during one of these retreats, all alone in the quiet of the cave, that his entire world was turned upside down. The first revelation wasn't some peaceful, serene experience. It was terrifying. Accounts say he was squeezed, overwhelmed by this immense presence, later identified as Gabriel, who commanded him, recite. He was so shaken that he ran home, trembling, and cried out to his wife Khadija, "Cover me, cover me." Her support and her immediate belief in what happened to him was absolutely crucial in those first moments. Now, the message he started preaching was radical. Pure monotheism, the idea of one and only one, God. This was a direct attack on the entire social and economic system of Mecca, which thrived on pilgrims coming to worship the hundreds of idols at the Kaaba. So the leaders of Quraysh, his own tribe, they saw him as a huge threat. For 13 years, he and his small band of followers faced ridicule, boycotts, and some really brutal persecution. Things in Mecca just kept getting worse and worse until it became clear they couldn't stay. But then, an invitation arrived from a city called Yathrib, about 200 miles to the north, and this move would become the single most important event in the founding of Islam. The Hijrah was so much more than just a journey. See, in 7th century Arabia, your tribe, your bloodline, that was everything. It was your identity, your protection, your entire social safety net. By leaving Mecca, these early Muslims were literally severing those ancient ties and forming a brand new community, one based not on blood, but on shared faith. It was so foundational that it's day one of the Islamic calendar. And this is how the Ummah, the global Muslim community, was born. You had the Meccan migrants, the Muhajirun, who gave up everything, and they were welcomed by the Medinan converts, the Ansar, which means the helpers. These two groups were formally joined as brothers and sisters, creating a whole new kind of society. So once in Medina, Muhammad's role just explodes. He's not just a preacher anymore. Now he's the leader of a city-state. He's a judge, an administrator, and pretty soon, a military commander. One of the first things he does is draw up this document, what we now call the Constitution of Medina. And for its time, this thing is incredible. It created a federation that brought together the Muslims and the various Jewish tribes of the city into one community. It guaranteed freedom of religion and said that everyone had to defend the city together. It was a blueprint for a multi-religious state, with Muhammad as the final judge in any dispute. But the conflict with Mecca wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Their first major battle was at a place called Badr. And just look at these numbers. The Muslims were outnumbered more than 3-1. Their victory was completely unexpected, and for them, it was a massive sign that God was on their side. It cemented Muhammad's leadership and really fired up the whole community. Badr was really just the opening act. The next 8 years were a whirlwind of conflict. There were major battles, like a tough loss at Uhud and a strategic win at the Battle of the Trench. It was this constant cycle of warfare and diplomacy that, against all odds, allowed the community in Medina to survive and actually grow stronger. And all of that brings us to the final, jaw-dropping chapter of his life, his return to the very city that had tried to destroy him. Think about this. 8 years after he had to flee Mecca in the dead of night to save his life, Muhammad marches back. But this time, he's at the head of an army of 10,000. The entire balance of power in Arabia had just flipped. Facing that kind of force, Mecca just surrendered. There was almost no fighting at all. And instead of the bloody revenge that everyone probably expected, Muhammad declared a general amnesty for his old enemies. The first thing he did was walk to the Kaaba, smash the 360 idols inside, and rededicate the ancient house of worship to the one God. After Mecca, things moved at lightning speed. In just 2 years, delegation after delegation from all over Arabia came to Medina to pledge their allegiance to him and to Islam. In 632, he led one final, massive pilgrimage to Mecca, where he gave his famous farewell sermon. And then, just a few months later, back in Medina, he fell ill and passed away in the home of his wife, Aisha. So by the time he died, the world was a different place. He left behind a new monotheistic faith, a scripture, the Quran, and a united political state that was about to explode onto the world stage and become a massive empire. So from orphan to prophet to statesman, his journey completely reshaped the world. And it leaves us with that one big question to think about. What part of that incredible legacy matters most today?